But I knew that if I did, I would be lost. I shook my head, trying to clear my mind. I won't let it take me. We'll find a way. Tom's eyes softened for a moment, but then he turned toward the bookshelf on the far side of the room, his fingers brushing over the spines of the ancient books that lined the shelves. There has to be something here, some kind of ritual, something that can help us. I walked over to him, trying to ignore the weight of the coat pressing against my shoulders. The whispers had reached a fever pitch, and I could feel them crawling under my skin, invading my thoughts. Tom pulled a heavy book from the shelf, its pages yellowed with age. He flipped through it quickly, his eyes scanning the pages. "Here," he said, his voice urgent. "There's a ritual, a binding ritual. It might work, but we'll need to act fast." He handed me the book, and I could feel the weight of the words inside, the power of the ancient text seeping through the pages. I skimmed over the instructions, my eyes moving quickly over the symbols and incantations. "Where do we do it?" I asked, my voice tight with fear. "Where does this ritual need to happen?" Tom glanced toward the door, his face pale. "There's a place outside, near the woods. It's an old altar. My grandfather used it. It's the only place where the ritual can work." I nodded, my heart racing. "Let's go. We don't have much time." The woods outside were dark, the trees looming overhead like silent sentinels. The air was thick with fog, and every step seemed to echo in the silence. The whispers were still there, swirling around me, urging me to stop, to turn back, to give in. But I pushed forward, my mind focused on the task at hand. Tom led the way, his steps quick and purposeful. We reached the clearing where the altar stood, a crumbling stone structure, covered in moss and ivy. It was small, but ancient, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. "This is it," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper, "the place where the curse was first bound." I stepped forward, the coat dragging against my body, resisting my every move. The whispers were louder now, the voices screaming in my mind, demanding that I stop. I could feel the weight of the entity pushing against me, trying to force me into submission. But I didn't give in. I couldn't. Tom set the book down on the altar, his fingers trembling as he began to chant the incantations. The air around us began to shift, and I could feel the energy of the ritual gathering. It was working, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. The entity would fight back with everything it had. The ground beneath me began to tremble, and the whispers turned into a roar. Shadows stretched and twisted around us, taking on strange, grotesque forms. The very air seemed to crackle with malevolence. "Stay focused," Tom urged, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. "We're almost there." I could feel the coat tightening around me, as if it were trying to choke the life out of me. The entity was fighting, but we were close. So close. With a final, desperate effort, I tore at the coat, pulling at the fabric with all my strength. The whispers turned to screams, and the shadows around us seemed to writhe in pain. But I didn't stop. I pulled harder, and finally, with a ripping sound that echoed through the clearing, the coat tore away from my body. The darkness erupted in a burst of light, blinding and deafening. The world seemed to collapse in on itself, and for a moment I thought I would be consumed by it. But then, just as suddenly, everything went silent. I opened my eyes, and the clearing was empty. The altar stood still, the symbols now faded, as if the curse had been lifted. Tom was beside me, his face pale but relieved. "We did it," he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. I looked down at my hands, still shaking, still feeling the residual energy of the entity that had been inside the coat. It was over, for now. But I knew one thing for certain. The curse wasn't truly gone. It was only waiting for its next victim, and I feared that someday someone else would make the same mistake I had. The clearing felt different now, as if something had been lifted, like a heavy fog had dissipated from the air. I stood there, still holding the torn remnants of the coat in my hands. It was no longer pulsing with that dark energy, but it still felt wrong. The fabric was cold, and the whispers had quieted to an unnerving silence. Tom was looking at me, his face a mixture of relief and sorrow. "You don't know how lucky we are," he said, his voice almost reverent. "I didn't think we'd make it out alive." I didn't say anything. I was too lost in my thoughts. Had we really destroyed the curse? Had we truly ended the entity's hold over the coat? I didn't know. I wanted to believe that we had, but something deep inside me, something primal, warned me that this wasn't over. The forest around us was still, the usual sounds of wildlife conspicuously absent. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness that clung to the trees, as though the world was holding its breath. I shivered, despite the warmth of the night air, and Tom must have noticed. "Let's get out of here," he said, his voice grim. "We've done what we could." We walked back toward the car, the weight of the journey bearing down on us with every step. The road back to town seemed longer than it had before, the darkness pressing in on all sides. Even though the ritual had been completed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Something was waiting. It had been a week since the ritual, and things had mostly returned to normal. Or at least, that's what I had convinced myself. Tom and I had stayed in touch, meeting up only a few times to talk about the aftermath. He'd been searching through more of his family's journals, looking for any sign that the entity had been fully vanquished. But deep down, I knew there was more to this story. Something wasn't right. One evening, as I was sitting at home going over some work, a knock echoed through my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I stood up and walked toward the door, my thoughts still clouded by the events of the past week. When I opened it, I froze. There, lying on the doorstep, was the trench coat. The same dark, oppressive coat that I had left behind in the clearing. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. How could this be? I had destroyed it. I had torn it apart with my own hands. There was no way it could have returned. But there it was, folded neatly, waiting for me. I stepped back, my heart racing. The whispers, those insistent whispers, had returned. I could hear them in the back of my mind, growing louder with every passing second. They were calling to me, urging me to pick up the coat, to put it on again. The entity was back, stronger than before. Before I could think, I slammed the door shut, my breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. I could feel the coldness of the coat radiating through the wood, as though it were trying to push through the door and into my home. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. What the hell was happening? How could the coat have come back? What was this thing that had such power over me? The phone in my pocket buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. I fumbled for it and answered it without checking the caller ID. "Tom," I said, my voice trembling. "The coat, it's back." There was a long silence on the other end before Tom spoke. "What do you mean it's back?" "It's here. It's on my doorstep. How is that possible? We destroyed it." Tom's voice was strained. I don't know, but it shouldn't have returned. I've been digging through my grandfather's journals again, and there's something I missed. Something important. It wasn't just a curse, it was a contract. A contract with the entity inside the coat. And once you've made the deal, there's no getting out of it. No matter what you do, no matter how many times you try to destroy the coat, it will always come back. I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. "So, we're trapped." "We're not trapped," Tom said quickly. "But we need to break the contract.